Okay, let us talk about what are contestable markets. So contestable markets is where there is a potential threat of entry. So these are imperfectly competitive markets, right? These are imperfectly competitive markets, and they have the potential threat of entry. Right? These are imperfectly competitive markets and they have the potential threat of entry. That is, there is a real competition as well as the potential one. Well, when you talk about the entry, so these the barriers to these entry, they are either non-existent, right? There are no barriers to entry, or they are very weak barriers to entry. So supposedly, if you are in some kind of the business and there are very few barriers to entry, and if I want to come into that business and I can come very easily, so there is a threat of potential entry in this business, and this becomes like a contestable market. Well, for example, in perfectly competitive market, now there is no as such in a way, because everyone is going to sell the same thing, right? So you can't say as such that there is much threat of the entry, because you know that eventually in the long run everyone is going to produce just the same product, and everyone is not going to make any profit in the long run. You're just going to make the normal profits. Even in the contestable markets, you're going to make the normal profits, but you are still producing a differentiated product. In a perfectly competitive market, you are producing a homogeneous product. In a perfectly competitive market, you are not innovating anything. In a contestable market, there is dynamic efficiency. You can innovate. You can innovate in terms of product, or you can innovate in terms of the process, right? So you can do that. And as far as all entrants are concerned, they have the access to the technology. They have the access to the same technology. Now, when they have the access to the same technology, this also becomes the potential threat. So if you are in some kind of business, and if I want to come into that business and I also have the same access to the technology which you have, now you also know tomorrow he can come very easily. So that is also one of the feature of the contestable market. And so there is one incumbent. Incumbent firm means already an established firm in the business. And this incumbent firm, for example, you are an incumbent firm and I am an entrant. So this incumbent firm, it doesn't have any brand loyalty, right? So no significant brand loyalty. So if they would have been a very loyal customers to you, then what happens is basically people can flock to you even if I'm coming into the business, right? So, but if I start selling at a lower price and people start coming to me instead of you, so there is no brand loyalty here, and that happens in case of contestable markets. So unless you innovate, unless you produce a better product, there is no brand loyalty, right? Then there exists a perfect knowledge. What do you mean by the perfect knowledge? You mean by the perfect knowledge this, that for example, you are an incumbent firm and I'm the entrant. I have a complete information about the kind of the product which you are selling. I have the complete knowledge about the processes which you are making, which you are using, and I know that I can replicate your product completely. I have a perfect knowledge about that. So if I have a perfect knowledge about that, that also creates a potential threat of the entry or a potential threat of the competition, right? So I being an entrant, I have a perfect knowledge about the product which the incumbent is producing or selling in the market. Then there's one point which have been coming again and again, that is hit and run entry. So supposedly if I am the entrant and I can just immediately come into your market, hit you, make some immediate profit, and if I want to go back, I can go back without incurring any cost. If I want to exit, I can just exit without incurring any cost. Neither there was any entry cost nor there is any exit cost. So this is based on the assumption that there is no sunk costs. This is based on the assumption that there is no sunk cost. Now, if you look at it carefully, what is this hit and run entry? Just look at it once more. I'm the entrant, you are the incumbent firm. I can come into your market, hit your market with my entry, produce the product, make immediate profit. If I want to leave, I can leave without making any extra cost, right? Without incurring any extra cost. And this is possible if there are no sunk costs, right? Generally, I mean, in reality, I don't think it will be possible. Why? Because, I mean, there are entry costs, there are exit costs. Not anyone who thinks that I can do this, they can just come. There are costs attached to it, right? But we're just making this assumption of no sunk costs. Sunk costs are which are irrecoverable, right? So what do you mean by the sunk cost? They are irrecoverable. They are irrecoverable, right? So if you're the incumbent firm and if you want to close down, you can, right? And you will not make any extra cost. You want to just get away, you can without incurring any extra cost. In reality, whether it will be true or not, that will be very difficult to say. But yes, I mean, that's an assumption of no sunk cost. You cannot recover these costs. Once they're made, you cannot recover them, right? Then the question which arises is about the pricing in these markets. So these are certain points, beta, right? You need to expand on these points. Then you have pricing in the contestable markets. Pricing in contestable markets. So how do you price your product in the contestable markets? So how do you do this? You do this in this way. Let me just form the diagram. Right. So you have this guy. So you have, have the AR curve, have the MR curve, right? And sort of, you can just say, I'm so sorry. This is, let's say, your AC curve, right? Sort of somewhere here is what your minimum is. Let's say this is what is your MC curve. This was your AR curve. This is what your MR curve. And your MC equals to MR comes here. right? And this guy here. So MC equals to MR comes at this particular point. This is what's your Q1 is, and let me call this point as, let's say, E1. Now this is the point where there is an imperfectly competitive producer. So there is no entry which has happened. This monopolist is making a huge profit. His price is way above than the cost which he is having, and so he is producing at Q1 at the price P1. So here you have price and cost. Here you have Q. Right. Now you have this guy. Let's say. So now the entry starts happening. When entry starts happening, then monopolist is also going to reduce the price, right? And it can reduce the price till this particular point where your price is equal to AC. That's the region of the lowest AC, let's say, and he can reduce the price, and when he reduces the price, let's say P2 Q2, right? This is, let's say, this point E2. So he has reduced the price to this much point where price is just equal to the lowest of AC, right? Price is just equal to the lowest of AC. So what you are doing out here is that if you look at this particular point E1, at this point you're making supernormal profits, while at this point you are making normal profits. At this point you're making normal profits. So what is the monopolist doing? Monopolist, because he's seen that yes, entry is going to occur, so he will start reducing the price, and he can reduce the price till the point where it is just touching the lowest point of the AC curve. And if there are unlimited profits, then of course it will attract the entrance, right? And it will, when it will attract the entrance, and your normal, super normal profits will eventually get converted only into normal profits, right? So this is the way you do the pricing out here. Now this has certain implications for the different kinds of efficiencies. So first one is your productive efficiency. First one is your productive efficiency. So let's say, okay, what do you mean by the productive efficiency? So productive efficiency is going to occur where the firm is going to produce at the point which is the lowest of the average cost, right? The firm is going to produce at the point which is the lowest of the average cost, right? So, and if you look at it, this is that point E2 approximately. Well, if you look at any imperfectly competitive market, if you look at any imperfectly competitive markets, for example, monopoly, right? Then why do you think they are producing at a higher cost? So they could have produced till this point, but they are producing earlier at this point, right? This particular point. They're producing at least this much of cost. Now, why do you think so that this productive inefficiency occurs in case of imperfectly competitive market? Now, this productive inefficiency occurs in the imperfectly competitive market. The reason being that these managers, because let's say monopoly, we're taking the extreme case. Managers, they have less incentive to make an effort, right? And also the lack of competition also. If there is a lack of competition, then then also they're not going to search for the ways to lower the cost, right? That also is one of the reason that imperfectly competitive markets, they are going to have higher cost, and many inefficient firms, they will still be producing in the market. But in case of contestable markets, so what happens in the long run, they have to reduce the cost. If they are reducing the price, they also have to reduce the cost, and they will search for the lower cost. So you can say that the contestable markets are productively efficient. Then you have allocative efficiency. Right. Now, let us talk about the allocative efficiency. So, allocative efficiency means what? That is, you're neither producing too much nor you're producing too less, right? You're not producing more than the perfectly competitive producer, and you're not even producing like a monopoly, right? So you're producing at the point where P is equal to, you're producing it at the point where price is equal to MC. So that would make allocatively efficient. But if you look at it carefully, that the firms who are earning these contestable firms, in contestable markets, the firms, they are going to make just the normal profits. So they making normal profits would mean that they are charging the price P equals to AC. Profit maximizing condition is P equals to MC. So basically, you can just say that eventually your profit maximizing and the zero profit condition will eventually become P equals to AC in this case. That happens even in case of perfectly competitive producer. So a zero profit condition requires P equals to AC. Profit maximizing condition requires P equals to MC. The only way is P equals to AC equals to MC. That means P is equal to AC, and hence these firms, whether they are perfectly competitive or the firms in the contestable market, eventually they will be producing at a point where P is equal to AC. That's one thing. So, and when you talk about allocative efficiency, you are actually saying that there is no deadweight loss. No deadweight loss which is occurring. So, and you also have to understand one thing, that this welfare loss, this deadweight loss, this is occurring not only because of the monopoly price, then this can also occur for any price which is above the marginal cost. So if you have the demand curve which is relatively inelastic, right? So it means that the consumers, they have more urgent demand, so you can just charge more price, right? So you'll be charging more than the marginal cost, and that will not be allocatively efficient. So for allocative efficiency, you would require P equals to AC, right? So sorry, P equals to MC, and eventually this condition will hold, and since you also have to produce at P equals to AC, but AC is equal to MC, so P is equal to MC. So the firms in competitive market, in the contestable markets, they're going to be allocatively efficient. Then you have dynamic efficiency. Then you have dynamic efficiency. Now, what do you mean by dynamic efficiency? Well, you mean by dynamic efficiency is this, that is, you're going to innovate, you're going to find out new products, you're going to find out new production processes, innovative processes. So I think for these contestable markets, they are going to innovate, right? Well, if you look at the another end of the spectrum, for example, a monopoly. Now, monopolist will not have an incentive to innovate. In a way, I mean, if he knows that so far, I mean, wherever he could see, he could find no competitors, then he will have no incentive to innovate. But these contestable markets, this potential threat of entry actually forces them to innovate, to find out new production processes, to find out better processes, to find out new products, not the monopolist firm. And at the other end of the spectrum, so one you have monopolists, other you have perfect competition. So if you look at the perfectly competitive market, will they innovate? No, they won't also innovate, because they know that all of us are selling the same product. When all of us are selling the same product, and even if somebody else will come that will also sell the same product, so what is the point of innovating? Because with innovation, you are actually expecting that you're going to make more profits, but eventually you will not. What happens in case of, I guess, in case of the contestable markets, that they are innovating because they want to keep their supernormal profits intact. Eventually, they will not be able to. They will have to reduce the price. They can earn just the normal profits, but at least they can delay the process, right? So, in that expectation, you could say that yes, the firms will innovate and they are dynamically efficient. So these firms, they are dynamically efficient. So they are productively efficient, dynamically efficient, and allocatively efficient. Then there are a few differences between perfect competition and contestable markets. So there are few differences between the perfect competition and the contestable markets. So what could be them? Well, in contestable markets, there is a possibility that one firm may dominate or few firms may dominate, right? In case of perfectly competitive market, there are many firms. Basically, that's what the idea is. In case of contestable markets, the firms are producing differentiated products. On the face of it, they are same, but they are selling it in this way that they are selling a better product, right? Than these guys, than the other producers. While in case of perfectly competitive market, they are producing the homogeneous products, right? They're going to produce the homogeneous products. Right, and well, if you look at it, these firms, the contestable markets, they are dynamically efficient. Well, the firms in perfectly competitive markets, they're not dynamically efficient, right? They're not dynamically efficient. Then you have, in a contestable market, there is a threat of the potential entry. There is a threat of potential entry, which is going to influence the firm's behavior, right? While in case of competition, I mean, competition exists in a perfectly competitive market. So as far as perfectly competitive market, competition actually exists. I mean, there's nothing new about it. But in case of contestable markets, this threat of competition is going to influence the firm's behavior. Are you with me? So, and there are few points which are similar also, that both of them are going to have normal profits in the long run. In the short run, both of them can have profits also, but in the long run, both of them are going to have normal profits. And then there are few points which are different also. Okay, and these firms, both the firms, they are both perfectly and contestable market firms. Both of them are productively and allocatively efficient, but the contestable market firms, they are dynamically efficient also, right? So this is the point for, and there was a question which appeared in Indian Economic Services 2018 paper 3, which says this, that what are contestable markets? We have done that. What implications do they have for productive, economic, and dynamic efficiency? We've done that. Are contestable markets same as perfectly competitive markets? We've done that. So the question says, are competitive markets same as contestable markets? So you have to give the points of difference as well as similarity. So I've just written the difference point. You can write the similarity points, that is they're going to earn normal profits. Both of them are allocatively and productively efficient also. Okay, so this is what I wanted to do in this class.